Ah, good. It's about time you showed up. We have a bit of a situation here, and are happy to have an experienced trapper to deal with it. We've cordoned off the area as standard protocols require.
Ah, I see you found the Needle Spitter T26000 series.
Yes,
This thing will shoot out
you
arrows at
wish.
30 feet per second. It's a deadly trap and will skewer anyone with no experience or who unknowingly triggers it. There is a small window, a chance to defuse the trap under the baseboard if carefully lifted up just enough.
Wow, you must be an expert. This must be easy for an experienced trapper like you. What is this, your 100th time seeing this trap?
Nope, this is my first time ever removing a trap. I've never even attempted to do this sort of thing before, but don't worry, I did stay at Holiday Inn
Just a
Express
little
last night. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, I am SocioPsycho and this is Mob Reviews, and today we're going to take a look at Pillars of Eternity. This is created by Obsidian Entertainment, available for PC, Mac, and Linux. It is a Baldur's Gate reskin nostalgia-filled style game in an isometrical top-down RPG adventure style. It received 77,000 Kickstarter backing supporters, so it's definitely a game the community wants, but how well was it actually put together? And we won't just praise the game for what it's done right and ignore what it has fallen short on. No, we will address all of the qualities of the game, whether they be qualities you wish to recognize or not. And we'll begin in the options menu. Now in the options menu, they actually did a very good job on having a large berth of definitely different and available, customized, playable, optional choices for the character. When we look in the game, you have different choices that will directly affect how you play. Do you want main companions before death? Or on a harder difficulty, do you want your companions to be outright killed if their health reaches 0? You have a stash, which you can access anywhere in the world, or do you want it to only be accessible from certain locations? These are things which are important, as you can see, the difference of choices. When we go into controls, it's very nice to see that there's a large variable of the different controller keys you have available, as well as the fact that you can rebind them with ease with no problem if that's what you wish, and you have a primary and secondary option. So in the configuration of the controls to really make the interface more your style, they definitely get a golden star. In autopause, as the combat is a turn-based option throughout the game, you have a choice to have an autopause happen when you either see an opponent or a character's damaged. As you can see with different variables upon how often you want autopause to happen, in case if you're getting a little sidetracked or it's all too much for you. If a large event happens, you don't have to miss it or feel like you're falling behind in a combat struggle, as the autopause will take care of anything if you have issues. Now when we get down to the graphics, it is nice to have VSync and some other small options available. The game doesn't have too much, as it is a very simplistic, although it is a high definition game, and it looks decent for what it is. It has its own atmosphere. I would like to see a little bit more in the customizational choices available. It's nice that they have colorblind mode for people who have that sort of differential problem. When it comes down to the performance option in the game has been running at 60 frames per second and there have not been any tearing or clipping. Unfortunately, I have suffered 1 or 2 crashes in the transitions of loading screens. It's given some error which was cannot switch to 1920 by 1080, going from 1920 to 1080, resorting to 1920 by 1080. It was a odd little thing and it's happened once or twice. The main performance problems that arise with the game are a lot of little bugs. The game suffers from these little graphical bugs, which can be annoying, but not necessarily game-breaking. They can fall down to just graphical animations of a character or a creature that has been killed, but the body's not actually fallen over. Instead, the character is still standing like they're alive. Or it could be an essence of the power or attack from a character. Even though the character is gone, that essence still remains. There have been more annoying bugs, such as a time when I get swarmed by insects, and the spell itself is supposed to last only 14 seconds, but unfortunately, the spell did not wear off. Even after traveling to a new zone and resting in an inn, the bug debuff continue to stay on my characters. It was only after several loading and reloading the game, fully exiting, was the bug actually debugged. When it comes to anything more severe, there was another situation where I would run into an enemy group and they would see me and combat would initiate, but nobody would attack me, and so I could kill my enemies without them attacking. And that may sound interesting, but it gets dull very fast. Again, was it game breaking? After a few exits and re-enters, it was able to fix itself out, but there are minor bugs and nuances which put hiccups in your gameplay and draw you out of the atmosphere and really the immersion aspect of the game. The greatest immersion breaker and greatest annoyance that I've experienced is the further you get into the game, the loading screens get much larger. Now, before you go off saying, well, you don't know what you're doing, it has to be your system and some hoo-ha like that, my system is very capable, as you can see as we go through this loading screen, the specs of what the game is required versus my specs of what I have. And you may think this may not be a huge deal, but when it takes in between 30 to 40 seconds at times to get through a loading screen, it really puts a huge damper on related gameplay when you have to go through a town. So one loading screen to get into the town, and then a second loading screen to get into the building. Oh, now I'm in the building, I need to go up to the second floor. So that's a third loading screen to get to the second floor to talk to who I need to. Then I need to go back down and then outside. So you're looking to 5 to 6 loading screens. And when each of those are taking between 30 seconds to a minute, depending on your system and how that variable is for you, you're looking at a task that should take about 2 minutes to accomplish. Say you just want to go to an inn or sleep or something minimum, or just trade goods. Now, instead of a task that's supposed to take only a few moments, you tack on an extra 4 minutes. This really does break the immersion and make the game quite annoying and frankly disheartening to even continue to want to play. Outside of these issues, has there been anything that has just prevented my progression straight on? No. Although in between the plethora of bugs and the annoyance of loading screens, on this alone, you may wish to wait a month or two before picking this game up so the developers have more of a chance to harsh out more of the bugs, as the game still feels as if it's in the end stages of beta rather than ready for release. Whether you experience the bugs that I have or have the same exact gameplay style that I have had is irrelevant, because even if 5 other people have the exact same experience I do, that's a chance that you have to be willing to take, that you may be one of those people. When we go back into the options menu, you have the sound quality. Now the sound is also very simplistic. It has good music, but really doesn't connect that music together with the atmosphere of the game. There are a few moments where the music really impacts upon the world and you're like, oh wow, this is a cool, upbeat, tempo battle fight. But it feels like they have 4 or 5 songs, and while it may be more, it feels the reusage of songs and the placing of these songs really doesn't add to the atmosphere to the game. It adds to a, wow, okay, I'm not just walking through and there's absolutely nothing playing, but you don't fall back to the music as thinking like, oh wow, that battle encounter was so epic, it's so amazing. Well, I was walking through that town and that music hit, and now I'm going to have nostalgia because of that music, and every time I think of that music or hear that music, I'm going to think about the great adventures I had in that game. When it comes to the music really propelling this game forward, it doesn't. Does it have good music? Yes. But does it hit that notch that makes it just legendary and puts the atmosphere of your adventure over the top? No, it does not. So we're going to talk about character creation. It's a easy thing to talk about. We'll go into the baseline of the characters, as we'll talk more in depth of the combat of those characters in the combat chapter, as you can see on the left side of the screen. So as we start here, you can see there are different categories that you can pick. Easy, which is for anybody who really has no experience in this type of game. Normal, which is good for starting out if you're trying to understand the rule set, you have some experience. Hard if you're looking for a challenge. And Path of the Damned, which is the equivalent of a nightmare mode. More preferable to people who find hard easy, or you're really confident in your ability. Now you also have Trial of Iron, which is very similar to a hardcore mode. You have 1 life and 1 save file. So if you die, if your character dies, your save file gets deleted and your character is lost. So it is a hardcore setting, and it's nice that they have that, because I myself enjoy playing a hardcore character, even though the negative effect of dying is pretty steep. But you want that challenge, you have that challenge available, and that's what's really nice. Expert mode takes off a lot of the helper features, so if you have that helper mode off, you won't receive that little extra bit of help in choosing which stats to take or what may be best to use in certain situations or understanding the interface a little more. It's more of a here's the world, go onto it, and don't look at us for any help. So when we go into the actual character creation part of it, it's really nice, and I was really appreciative of the depth that they landed into the character creation. As we go over, you have a choice between male and female character. That's pretty simplistic, as you can see. Now you also have races, which give a passive bonus as you look on the right side of the screen. You have a small description of that race and the passive abilities of that race. As we select through these, you'll see the different passive abilities do change up. It can be a negative or a positive. And this will definitely be nice in allowing you to customize your character to more what you're seeking as you play. And when you select your character, again, it has a sub-race description about the character and the passive abilities, and you can find the not only race but the sub-race that really calls to your playstyle. You don't necessarily have to build the character, oh, this has a good bonus, so I have to use this character over that character. If you're trying to maximize your stats, then yes, but you don't need to feel like if you select wrong in this character selection that you're screwed, because that's not the case. When we go to the next classes, and we'll talk more about these classes in the combat organization, but you have your Barbarian, which is simply a small description, and they are more melee weapon holders and fighters. You have Ciphers. Ciphers are a sort of mix in between a battle cleric and a mentalist mage. They can fight in the front grounds of a battle, but they rely more on mind manipulation or ally helping to boost or protect. So they can either take control of enemies in a mentalist fashion or give your allies a little bit more vigor. You're a fighter, which is good for being a tank or just a DPS, melee or ranged. Same with a paladin. They're pretty much the same, although they have the paladins more faith-based. And in an RPG like this, you have the actions of light and dark. If you're evil, you become a fallen paladin, and it takes a role of its own. A ranger, which is more archery with an animal companion, and the animal companions are not all that useful, and we'll talk about that more in combat. You have a wizard, which obviously casts spells. Now, one thing to note about the wizard is more manipulation and some damaging spells, but they don't have summons. Summoning in this game is very limited, and the wizard does not have any summoning spells. You have your rogue, and again, rogues are a bit taken out from what you may expect them to be in the casual market. The rogue characteristic applies a bonus damage from melee weapon attacks when the target is incapacitated in some fashion, or the character comes out of the shadows to attack. But stealth and stealth-based movement is not limited to rogues alone. Anyone can pick up traps, lay down traps, or hide in stealth. Stealth is not really a bonus gain stat from a rogue, so they take that away. And while you do gain a bonus to the very beginning of stealth and mechanics, if you select the rogue, anybody can gain those stats. You have your priest, which is basically the healer of wounds. They can do some damage, they can be on the front line, it can be ranged, but they are a good support class. Now, unless you're going for the hardest setting, you really don't need a priest due to a strong tank and the way the tank is built. If you build a good character tank, you can actually get by easier with a druid than you can a priest, due to the spell layout. And we'll go over more of that why in the combat section, but unless I'm playing on the hardest setting, I really don't see a reason to have a priest. You have a monk, as you may not be aware of monks if you have not played Baldur's Gate 2, and that's fine. You don't need to have an understanding of the style of game in order to be able to enter. There's really no enter level barcode. It's very helpful and starts you off very easily in the understanding of what's going on. Monks use their hands, they're not known for using weapons, and they're more melee fighters up into the fray. Druids have shape-shifting ability. Now, the shape-shifting ability is not a long-lasting effect. It is a short duration once per combat, as you have certain spells that will be once per combat, once per rest. But druids do have some minor spell orientation, whether it be damage or helping out of the allies. Combining a druid's abilities with a tank is a very powerful way to defeat your enemies without too much problem. They do have some summon abilities as well when it comes down to summoning a creature, but again, there's only about 1 or 2 spells for the druid to summon, and they really are not that powerful. And you can only summon them in combat, and as soon as combat is dismissed or over, they disappear. So summoning is not that powerful in this game, and it's quite weak. And lastly, you have the Chanter. The Chanter is actually a pretty powerful class, as it is a mixture in between a cleric and a bard. The Chanter chants abilities and spells throughout the game, and these abilities give passive bonuses to everybody around them as they chant, sort of like a bard would be singing a tune, raising everybody's morale. A Chanter will do the same thing. Now, a Chanter can also summon in allies by the use of chant points. They gain chant points as the battle progresses forward and the more they chant. These summons are not that powerful, and to stand alone by themselves will not work. They can supplement a front line or help curb the enemy from getting to your ranged, but to rely on them alone is definitely not going to be the overall helping factor. The real bonus to the Chanter's summoning ability is the fact that there is no cooldown or limit to how many creatures you can summon at a time. Now, there is a limit. Let me explain that. There is a limit if you summon a monster and 2 of them arrive. You can't summon another 2 because they'll replace the first 2. But if those 2 die, then you can summon another 2 because it goes based off of Chanter points, which are gained in combat. So it's not like the other classes where your spells are based off of a rest. I went into battle as a mage with 5 spells, and I won't get those 5 spells back after casting them until I rest. Where Chanter will continue to be able to use their abilities throughout the battle continuously. The trade-off is they don't have as much range or flexibility as a wizard. So let's move forward. After we pick a character, you go into the ability. Each different class is obviously going to have a different ability, and you select your ability to begin the game with. Which then brings you to the attributes. As you can see, the helper status brings into a star. So if I want to build a tank, I'm going to need a lot of constitution so I can survive bigger hits, some resolve so I can take on more deflection and avoid willpower attacks. As you can all see in the reading of these different attributes and what they do as you select them. So if we click on dexterity and we say, oh no, we don't want any dexterity, we'll move it as low as we possibly can, you'll see the negative effects of action speed and reflex. And if you're not sure what reflex is, you can just scroll over reflex. The game has a lot of in-tool tips which are very useful in making sure you understand exactly what your character is putting their points into. So there's really no lack of understanding of what your character is actually achieving. And the same thing with might. So depending on exactly what type of character that you want to build, then you'll do that. And then we go again to your culture, which is a bit more of a background story. And while you can see the different elements of the story, each where you come from will give you a passive never ability point to use. So we'll just go with Constitution because this character is a fluff character anyways, so we're not really worried about anything. And then you come to the background, and all these, the culture, the background, play a slight role in telling the story of who you are. And we'll go more into that in a moment. Now you have the ability, survivor ability points that are attached to your background, such as stealth, lore. Lore allows you to use scrolls. Stealth obviously keeps you hidden, and anybody can use stealth, like I said. You have survival, which makes potions and abilities have more effect, the longevity of them. Athletics comes down to interactionable moments, depending on the abilities you have, whether it be stealth, mechanics for traps, or lore, as well as your attributes of intelligence or might, comes down to allowing you certain choices in conversational dialogues, which give you a customizational feel that, oh wow, because my character has high intelligence, I was able to understand and rebuttal in a certain way versus my idiot warrior who's got 3 intelligence and doesn't have that option available to him. So after you select which one you want, it's a very basic hair and color selection of your outfit, which you can select and change throughout the game at no problem. And the selectional appearance doesn't need to be all that large, and they didn't put too many options in the game, and it really doesn't need to be, especially if you wear a helmet throughout the game, your hair will be covered up. And as the game is top down, it's not a huge deal. And the appearance is split up, you see 66, but the thing that annoys me about the appearance is that it's split up in between half, so 33 male, 33 female. It would have been better if it was about 60 of each, male and female, due to the fact that when you create a character, sometimes you create a character and you don't find a portrait that really represents the character that you created, and it's a little disheartening to be like, well, I created this character, I like this character, I feel good for this character, this is my character, but I don't have a portrait that really goes with it. So I would have liked to see more choices and a better split up of that. And then obviously just your voice, although your character really doesn't talk throughout the entire game. These are just when you click on a character and you give them a command, they'll say, oh, okay, I'll move over there. Very simplistic. And then finally your name. So as you can see, the character creation of a game is actually quite large and in-depth. And I definitely do appreciate that. Now, one other factor to point out is that the characters that you create, while your main character does have a tie into the story as the watcher, the one of the characteristics that make you, supposedly special, you do have the option when you go to taverns to hire on adventurers. You're basically saying, okay, I want to hire on an adventurer, but you're creating, and it allows you to create an entirely new character, so you can build a party of 6 characters that are fully customized to a playstyle that you want. You don't need to rely upon the characters that the game has created for you unless you want to really dive into that. And we'll go into story more of that aspect, but if you want to just select the characters in the world that the game has provided, then you'll be able to do that and get by. But if you want to create an entire customized party and play in that fashion, then you have that availability as well. And I'm sort of strewn half and half on this part, because while it's nice to be able to have a fully customizable party and really be able to play with characters that you want to, or experiment with different types of characters and different types of backgrounds to optimize your playstyle the way you want, I appreciate that. It also does question the replayability mark, because if you look at a game like Baldur's Gate 2, where it opened up the entire list and you had a bunch of different options available to you of characters that you could play as, barbarians, fighters, mages, clerics, and then sub-styles of those characters, a specializational type of cleric, a specializational type of mage. As you played through the game, there was such a large choice available that with the fact that you couldn't create an entire party outside of playing the game in a multiplayer fashion, it made it feel like when you played it again with a replayability aspect that your character could be uniquely new each time. With this, the options are a bit more weighed down, along with the spells that they have available are split up, and it's really not a abundance of different amounts of spells. It's not as the mage has a huge abundance and encumbrance of spells that are different from the priest, or the priest and the mage are completely different than the druid. They all sort of share in their circle of power. While the spells may be different and they don't overlap, there are not that many, and there's really not a sense or choice as you progress forward of like, wow, my character is unique. And we'll talk more in depth about that when it comes to combat. So whether you really like that system and fact that you can create a character and a whole party of characters, or you feel that's sort of a cheat, just falls down to you. You may like it, you may not. And while I am interested in replaying some of the characters and replaying the game as maybe a monk or a paladin to see how the development of a character helps or changes, the fact that I can just go on to the character that I've already beat the game with and just pick up a level 7 character and customize them to exactly what I want saves me a lot of time to answer that question. So it's really up to the individual. Now we're going to talk about the interface, and now one thing I definitely like about the interface is its sleekness. It's not overburdened, it's very easy to manage or to control. Now as you can see here, we have a very simplistic interface, but if you want a bottom bar available to the game, they do have that. You can make the solid HUD background into the options if that's what you want. It's not something I really enjoy, but it is available. Now the annoying aspect of the interface is the fact that clicking a spell, so if we click on our druid and we say Hailstorm, if I click directly on the target, it's going to go onto the target as you've seen. But if I'm going to do Hailstorm on the portrait, Well, now my character is going to cast it down here. So even though the portraits are here, they're transparent. And you have to keep that in mind. It really fucked me up in some battles where I was like, wait, what are you doing? Why are you running to the south? I need you to heal my tank or cast something on one of these people. And when I realized, I was like, wow, really? So I can't click on the portrait, I have to click on the character. You want to see it again? Boom, magic. Look at him run away even though I clicked on the portrait, directly on the portrait, and I pissed somebody off. But what are you going to do, right? That's life. So as we continue through, you can see the interface is very simplistic, with different characteristics have different abilities. This is my rogue, and you can see the special attacks that she has, among with the traps and the availability to change weapon sets. You say, what is weapon sets? Well, let's go into the inventory. As we look at the characters in the bottom slot, follow the cursor, you can see different weapon slots. So it's very easy to switch in between weapons. So if you start range and somebody's in your face, you can switch melee. That way you won't be at a huge disadvantage. You have your quick items. That can be anywhere from traps to potions to summoning creatures. And then obviously all your gear slots available, which we'll go over in a moment. So the way the characteristics of the abilities are placed down, I haven't had any issues. It's very simplistic. You do have to be careful, such as if I'm selecting over the second spell category, if I want to move to the first, well, I have to go straight up, then over. Because it's not like, okay, if I click on it, it doesn't just stay. So you have to go up and over. Is it a big deal? Not really. It's just something you have to be aware of every time you do it. Otherwise, you're going to be annoyed, be like, oh, why can't I click on this? Damn it all! So it's pretty simplistic. When it comes to the enchanter, the chants, again, very simplistic. You create the different chants, and we'll go over these in combat again, but that's what you can see. And as you play the different chants down, different chant spells will increase. So let's get rid of this guy real fast because he's ruining my groove, you know? So when we look at the chant spells, if we just go to B and select one spell, now he has two. So it's a very simplistic interface, no problem with that whatsoever. You have all your characteristics with passive abilities. These are the chanter points I was talking about earlier. And for the Cypher, which is sort of the cross between a mind, mentalist, mage, and a cleric, they have focus points which regenerate very slowly throughout battle. And the spells don't go off of rest like the other characters, they go off of the focus. You have your standard attack, to attack an enemy, cancel attack, select everybody, and stealth. Like I was saying, anybody can go into stealth, and when we go into the character requisites, as you can see in the skills, my main character has 0 in stealth, but my Cypher has 10 in stealth. So he'll be really useful in scouting around an area with 2 mechanics, but if I want somebody to pick up the traps that I find, then I want to go more mechanic based. So unlike in other games, rogues don't hold a monopoly. Now you do also have availability for slow mode, so if you want to really make sure you don't miss a beat, you have that, or you can do fast mode, which is more beneficial as there are traps in this game and they are quite dangerous, but the fact that anybody can go into shadow and you can just move around, click on fast mode, make sure you don't run into traps. I think in the entire game I only ran into 1 trap, and I was deliberate because I didn't have a skill to deactivate it. So doing this will definitely keep you safe from blindly dying, put it that way. You have your camps, which we'll talk more about in combat or level design, but camps allow you to rest. Instead of just resting wherever you want, you need campfire materials. You can hold up to 4, and these will heal you up. You have your inventory, character sheet, journal, map, and stronghold, and obviously options, as well as your combat bar if you want to remove that. So if you want to really have a clean interface, you have the option to do such. So you have more freedom of choice in manipulation of your interface that you may get in other games. You can go crazy or you can just be humble. So let's talk about the inventory, because the inventory does fall down into the interface. And in the inventory, you have the different characters that you can easily select from. You have the different types of items if you want to basically see which items, if you have a poor organizational system, where are all my potions, where are all my cloaks or necklaces, where are my chest pieces, and you can see the different ones light up. The cloak and the net do share a slot. So if we look here, he has a cloak, she has a necklace. It's the same slot. You have the availability for a helmet, chest, 2 rings, a belt, and boots. The Grimoire is for mages. It is a spell book. It's very simplistic, and they have a fascination with pets in this game, which from what I can notice really offer no benefit whatsoever to the game. They don't give you some passive ability or anything else. It's more like a collector's fee that somehow found its way from MMOs into this game. Maybe some people like it, but I really don't see the point to it. It's definitely not a familiar. So if you're thinking it's a familiar pet that you can talk to, you can send it to scout and everything else, no. It is pure, straight up like an MMO pet, not a familiar. So as you can see, the different characteristics on the left side of the damage reduction, defense, and accuracy, so you get an overlay of what's going on, as well as weapon sets and quick items, your camp supplies, and the money cost. Money I found in this game is abundant. It is crazily abundant that I have so much of it and spend next to nothing of it. There's really no money dump in the game whatsoever. And it comes down to the stash. I really like the stash. The stash is a place to throw all your gear. Now you can make it so that you can't have access to this if you don't want to. But me, myself, being more of a loot whore, I definitely like to collect every single item and sell every single item. And that could be in part why I have so much money. But the stash makes it doing such so much easier. It is probably the easiest system in any game that I have seen in not only just collecting the gear, but also selling the gear. Because even in systems that are similar to this one takes it a bit step further. As we look at the merchant category, as you see me selling all these items, it's really nice that I'm able, as I'm adventuring, to just put these items in my stash, but I can't access them if I don't have the availability selected in the options menu to go back into my stash and take something out unless I'm in an inn or my home base. But the ease and ability to simply just throw all these items in my stash and then throw all these items in my trade queue for the merchant is the best thing about this game as a loot whore. I have not seen a system this well thought out, and I love it. I absolutely love it. This should be like a mandatory standard for any game that deals with large quantities of loot. It is that beautiful. It doesn't take you out of your combat, doesn't take you out of your adventuring, and maybe if you're somebody who wants to have the characters hold the loot and wants the characters to have to go back to town, when you have that option, you still have that option to do that. It doesn't take that away, it just adds more to it, and I definitely appreciate that. As well as the organizational cleanliness of the different tabs in the stash make finding stuff so easy. So yes, it is definitely very simplistic and very beautiful. When we come back out here, you have your character sheet, which gives you a rundown of the class of the character, the level of a character, the experience bar, the attributes, the effects that they have on the character based off of any special spell or sleep regimen. As you go into different inns, certain inns and rooms will have a bonus, will give a bonus upon resting in there to a certain stat. Do I think that really makes sense, or is it really beneficial? No, absolutely not. I think it actually degrades the value of the actual stats and the hard work that you acquired them to just be like, well, you rested in this room, so you gain +1 mechanics. It's like, why does that room have a lock chest, which I'm just practicing all night instead of sleeping? Where are we going here? The passive bonus increase seems like a fluff reward to going to bed rather than anything else, and undermines the hard work the players done to actually achieve the rank and skill that they have acquired. As you can see, the skills also that you have available and any abilities and talents. Now the abilities and talents are things that you gain as you level up. Leveling up is very simplistic and very similar to the actual characteristic of character creation. So it's not like you're going to be confused or confounded, and when it comes to most of the spells, they usually just end up giving you them rather than you having to go out of your way to find them or learn them. And we'll talk about that specifically about mages when we get into combat. Now you can also see the party's entire reputation in between the different areas. Reputation, if you remember, Baldur's Gate was, hey, I killed somebody, I lost reputation, or I did a bunch of good deeds, I have high reputation, which means merchants will trade better with me, I'll get better deals, and people will be overall kinder to me. This sort of holds the same degree, it just breaks it up more in between zones, and as I've noticed, it does have a few character choice options available into it, but if I'm evil, people aren't going to be hunting me down. If I slaughter an entire town, I'm not gonna have to worry about getting ambushed on the road by the Knight's Crucible or some order of justice seeing me as the villain and wanting to put me down. So the party reputations are more fluff than anything else in the interface, and I'm not going to go too much further into that because that goes into story, but as you can see here, there is a lot of information that's split up in between the entire party versus the personal of that character. So if you're looking for a certain information, you definitely do have it. Which brings us, when we talk about information, the quest system, which is nice. I like how the quests are organized. It would have been nicer to have the option to not show the quests that I have completed, but as you can see, the quests I've completed are grayed out versus the ones that are still available. Journal. Obviously, your biography is what I was talking about earlier with your character customization and the background choices, as well as the choices that you make in the game, the quests that you complete, and everybody that you talk to and how you act in the world. This is sort of your epilogue of how the game describes the type of person you are based off of the type of choices you've made. So if you're hoping for a story literally written based off of your actions, it does have that. That may be a thing that you will love about this game, or something that you don't even care about. Me, I didn't even care about it. And then obviously you have the bestiary / encyclopedia of all items. So if you're looking for a what does this spell do or what is this creature, then you have that availability. We will talk about the bestiary a little bit more once we get into combat, and you have notes in case you want to create more notes for whatever reason. So I know that was a lot of information, and you're like, okay, wow, we understand character creation, we understand the interface. When are we going to get to the game? Come on, show me the game. And we're almost there, don't worry. I have been showing you a game, what are you talking about? So now we're going to talk about the level design and the character design of the entire game. The character design of the game is actually very well done. Now, as you've been able to notice, the game is running in a high definition quality. It's much better looking than Baldur's Gate, obviously, because that game is 15 years old. And this is high resolution, great artwork, great dungeon feels. When you go into a dungeon, or you come up against a dragon, or you're looking through these different cities, it definitely does feel and look very nice. The level design in its visualization is like, wow, this is pretty, or wow, I feel like I'm in a dungeon. It definitely hits the nail on the head in the category of how it looks and feels. But unfortunately, when we look at the actual map, you start off in Glate Lysias and you make your way down to Gilded Val. And everything fits together, it works out well. And Gilded Val is very dark, it has a very dark feel to it. It looks dark, it propels to a story, and like, okay, wow. So as you can see, the world is not that large. There are around 18 to 20 environmental zones and some city locations. It's not all that large. It's not like, oh wow, this world is so huge. And the pathway to get through it is very limited and very linear. You start out in the northwest corner, but you can't get to the middle of a map until you complete Kowdnun. And then once you get down, you can't go further over into the eastern part of a map until you complete areas in the town. So it's very limited in what options you have available to travel to, and it's not a question of, wow, this looks nice, or wow, this environment's good. But when you're exploring, the feel of the exploration is very hand-holdy. It's, okay, I'm going to one map, now I'm going to go to the next. But where I go is very dictated for me. How much time I spend in there is the only thing or choice I have. Are there some hidden structures or secret dungeons in these zones? I won't really say hidden or secret, but then again, that's, they're not just like, hey, look at me, we're a hidden dungeon, come join us. Yeah, you have to look for it, obviously. But the way the world is, it's not exactly open up to you, and it is a very linear pathway. On top of the fact that when you go into towns or cities, it's very limited, again, in your explorational capability to feel more like the world has depth. In the fact that you are unable to explore into homes. The only shops or buildings that you can go into are armories or inns or buildings that are quest related and have a direct purpose that ties into the story. There is no home that is just a home for a reason. There is no string of houses which are just a string of houses when who knows what you'll find inside. You might find loot, you might find trouble, you might find nothing. But it doesn't even give you that freedom. So the world may seem a little large, or the cities may seem sprawling, but they really aren't, and it lacks any true depth. One thing to talk about when it comes to the level design, which falls into sort of character design, is the crafting system that they decided to have in the game. So you're able to create scrolls of spells, potions, and food, all to help supplement your battle. On harder difficulties, you will need to use these different spells and create a multitude of potions. As you can see here, you have potions of different types available. Again, it's very simplistic, it's really not all that complicated, and instead of having a merchant system where you go into town and you find somebody who really has the potions you need, they're going to be really expensive, it falls more down into a crafting system to try to make the usage of items you find in the world. They try to add more depth in that way, and the way the spells are tied and the potions gain more benefits from the survival skills. They do have depth in the crafting system. Me personally, it's not something I really enjoy doing, but it is something that you need to do if you want to beat the game on harder difficulties, such as the toughest difficulty, because you'll need to make sure you have a food buff, a potions ready to handle different situations. And the other area that is very simplistic is the enchanting. This is sort of the same, though it doesn't really have too great of a variable upon what you can do. You are able to, if you have your requirements again, to put down a attribute that you wish, constitution, dexterity, intelligence, might, as you can see here, and then it just increases as a +2, but really nothing beyond that in the attribute bonus. And when it comes to proofing, it's pretty much the same thing. It has extra damage mitigational capabilities against certain elements rather than it offering some special ability or really having something unique upon the weapon. And the quality of a weapon is pretty much the same. The higher the enchantment, as you can see, the greater the damage reduction does take. Now you have this availability within reason to different items, but not all these items can have different enchantments, such as the shield doesn't have as much as the chest plate, as you can see. The weapon has some of its own, such as an extra burning damage attached to it, and slaying of a creature, which means if you attack a creature, which you have primordial advantage over that creature. So you can take it for what it is. I'm not really a crafter, so for what I see of how they interacted the items that you find throughout the world into the fact that you can buy items to help craft and better your weapons, tied in with the sub-attributes, is definitely nice. Can you really have a customizational crafting system upon where you are able to make a weapon or tool to suit your needs? No. You are very limited in what you can choose. So if you love crafting, this may be disappointing to you because it's not as large as you would like it to be. And if you don't care about crafting, then you're not going to care about it. Really, the only person that might be excited about this and its simplicity is really somebody who's brand new to crafting would find this not overwhelming and not be upset about the lack of depth in it. Overall, it's decent for what it has, but it is more like a starter kit rather than an in-depth crafting system. So another thing in the level design is the fact that you have a keep in the castle. And this castle is supposed to, I don't know, be a money dump or be something that's like, hey, look, a home base. It's cool, isn't it? And you have prestige and security. The first thing I think I don't like about this, and I think is stupid, is they have the item log backwards. The stronghold status item check sheet of what's going on. You have to scroll down every time for the new report. Or what happened. Like, what? When I open this, the new report should be on top. It shouldn't be on the bottom. I shouldn't have to scroll down every time to find it. That was an oversight. Also, you have these small adventures that happen, and you can assign somebody to go to it from not your main party, but your reserve. There's also been a slight bug with it showing a item or quest available, and it not being one. The quests only give you loot or minor low items. I haven't found any of these items that they give me to actually really be impressive or useful, again, as the items in the game come more from the enchantment of personalization rather than the dungeon hunting finding. Hey, you killed a dragon, congratulations. I hope you are not hoping for some awesome loot, because here are some torn, half-eaten boots. You have a system where it's sort of a money dump. You can upgrade your castle to look a bit more pleasantful. But even if you have a shop, the shopkeeper doesn't offer anything amazing. The crafting store or the barracks, they don't offer anything really amazing. I can have a barracks and I have a bunch of hirelings. I can only have 8 hirelings. So even though I upgraded my security and I have all these hirelings and this says currently unpaid, I have 52, almost 53,000 gold, but this guy is currently unpaid. What the fuck is that about? So the case is here that even with as much protection I have, bandits can still raid some of my income from my keep. And it's like, yeah, that makes sense, sure. And then you have party management, which you're party in reserve versus not. I understand they wanted to have a home base and they wanted to have some sort of sentry which was like, hey, look at you have your own base, but it really doesn't matter. Outside of maybe arguing that because it ties to a side quest, that it might matter in a story-based fashion, it does really nothing to actually be useful in any manner in the progression of a main story or the progression of an individual character in a sense of ownership or powerfulness. The level of choices that you make when it comes to the keep that I've experienced are very minimalistic to non-important. This does tie into with the story. While the level design graphically may be nice and the artwork is very beautiful in how they've depicted the vision of this world, and I like that, the story doesn't really connect all that well with it. Now, as we said, you start out, and when you hit the first town of Gladen Val, you have this sense of, okay, we just started the game, our caravan got attacked, no big secrets or spoilers in this review. We escaped, we ended up in Gladen Val, we awokened along the journey because the point of the game is that you become awakened. Now, what does that mean, you become awakened in the game? Well, that basically means that every soul is like a washed sock. Once you die, your soul gets returned to a circle in the sky or something like that, and then it will go down into another body over time, and you will live a new life. But your past memories of your past lives will have the availability to resurface and drive you insane if that happens over time, unchecked. So a huge memory sparks of your past and you become awakened. And so the whole situation is, okay, I'm awakened, what's going to happen? I need to find somebody who can tell me what happens and why I'm awakened. And when you come to Gladen Val, it really sets the atmosphere of, okay, there's some seriously wrong shit happening as you come across a tree filled with a bunch of dead people. And you find out there's a plague of sorts going around, which is making people soulless. So your main point is to find out why you've awakened and talk to somebody who can give you pointers about what that means, as well as finding out that, okay, there's a issue. Because right now this issue of people who are soulless is not your problem. It's simply a sub-raising division of a story which you'll come across into. The way the story is written, though, is very long, and this can be possibly a discouragement for some people. The game is written like a book, not an adventure. And while I'm going to make up a scenario for you, this is an example of what I mean. So if you are walking down a path and you get ambushed by a group of bandits, and these bandits wish to talk to you before attacking you, the dialogue in the game will go something like this. As the adventurer walked down a pathway, the warm breeze blowing on their back, the guided and beautifully shaped trees along the stern and long winding path, as the summer wind and glittering sun beamed through the trees, the leaf petals and shades slowly drifting across the land as they slowly see figures arise from the forest to bar their way. Ironclad and heavily armored, these opponents' unknown origins come into the view of a character to stand against and be controversial against the hero. Then, when the conversation talks, it's more like a monologue than an actual interaction. And while that may be a facetious, made-up scenario, that is what you have to look forward to through the entire game. It's as you are reading a book. And with that tied into the level design of the pathway is very linear. So the way you're going is I have to go to one map, then deal with 60 pages of dialogue, then fight a little bit, then go through another 60 pages of dialogue just to get through a story. I felt like I was reading a book rather than playing a game. And while I have nothing against people who like to read books, it was very annoying because the game eventually started to feel more like a detective slash IRS tax report slash death by PowerPoint game rather than an adventure. I didn't feel as if the writing was sculpting me towards and having some in-depth fluidity of epicness. I felt more like, okay, I get it, 12 pages to tell me one event. It was mind-blowingly stupid. They made up all these extra little details to try to make the environment more realistic instead of just having the conversation and then having the battle start. You were going with a certain art style. If you want more in-depth environment to be shown visually to the character, then create your game that way so visually they can see it. Because you know what they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So stop making me read 1,000 words for every interaction that happens. It's very annoying. Now, that's not my only flaw with the story. It comes down to the fact that they've created so much dialogue. The game feels fragmented in a way that you don't really feel a progressional push forward. You have to continuously check your journal to be like, okay, where the hell am I supposed to be going now? Who the hell am I supposed to be talking to? And where am I supposed to go next? The story seems very fragmented. There's a part in Radix Hold. If you look on the map here, you'll see Radix Hold in the north. Now this falls down to more of a side quest mission because the Lord has gone crazy of sorts and has started killing people. If you go to this hold and you confront him to kill him and change the seat of power, it would have been nice if this had more depth in some regard, or even been tied to the main story. But it falls down to a side quest, which I get. You know, it's fine. Okay, it's a side quest. It's not part of the main quest. It adds a little bit more fluff to the game. That's cool. No problem. But as you progress forward, the only people that you talk to are people at the very front gate. So you come up to this castle, you talk to people at the gate, and you're like, hello, I want to talk to your king. And they're like, no, go away. And your choice is to go away or either kill him. And if you go away, you can sneak into the castle on the other side, upon which you'll fight people who are in the castle. But at no point throughout the game is there a point where you come into a cathedral or a grand hall or a barracks room or something and there's a captain of the guard or a frantic believer in what the king or lord is doing. And they don't start a dialogue and say like, for our lord, for his vision, for the righteousness. There's no real belief that these people are actually anything other than just mobs put onto the scenario for you to overcome. There's no depth in the game, and that little bit of a example is what you end up facing throughout the entire game. The mobs, the creatures, the monsters, the majority of them, easily 8 out of 10 of your encounters will simply just be fodder for you to kill, rather than something to explore, something to find out. The ones that you do have the capability to talk to or explore are tied to a quest, or it's some sort of don't kill me or I'm going to eat you type deal. It's not a fanatic group who strongly believe in their leader's idea or see you as an enemy and an invader and are willing to stand up. It doesn't add that theatrical sense of depth where, wow, I'm invading this and they are pissed, or I'm invading this and I am just have this sense of wading through and destroying these people's hopes and their dreams, or this guy's just a guard, you know? There could be a guard in there that is just a guard. He's 9 to 5, he's enjoying it, he's trying to provide for his family, he's the average guy, he's not a bad guy, and you could come across him and he could be like, whoa, 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 don't fucking kill me. Don't kill me, I throw down my weapon, don't kill me. But there's none of that. There is no depth. So all the enemies or characters in the game actually feel very weak. It's as if they're just there to be there to try to add some depth. It's like a political press conference. Hey, so-and-so is going to talk at a podium for his political campaign. We need to fill this hall of people so he feels important. We'll pay people to come in and sit down in these chairs. That's what it feels like. It feels like the entire world is just fluff instead of actual depth. When you go further into a story, and you may say I'm destroying the story a little bit more than maybe I should, but when the game is majority story heavy base and written as a book, well, it needs to be addressed. There's a point in the fact that it says your choices matter, your characters matter, your customization matters, what you do in world matters. And while I may agree to a degree that yes, if you go on a murdering rampage, some other people may look at you with a frowny face and say, wow, that was really bad, I don't like talking to you. Or a quest may be open to you. But is there really any difference? Because if I slaughter an entire village and I go to another area, I'm not going to get ambushed my every step by the Crusaders of Justice in this world because I'm an arch villain of everything that's good. It's not going to happen. There's a point in a warehouse where you come across a man and he's like, hey, I have this package that I want you to deliver. And you're like, okay, I'll deliver this package. You deliver the package, you find out it was contraband of a sort, and the rival guild was upset because this guy had you trading those goods basically over their agreements that the guild that was angry is the one that trades in that. Nobody else can trade in it. So, the group that's upset at you says, hey, you have a choice. You can walk away, or you can go back to them and kill them, or you can attack the group of people who confronted you and kill them. So I did that. I said, okay, I don't like you being in my face. It's time for you to fucking die. So I killed those guild members that came from that group. I slaughtered them all. Then I went back to the warehouse guy, the merchant, and I said, hey, I slaughtered them all. What do you want me to do now? And he panicked. He freaked out like a little bitch and said, oh my god, how could my idea of entirely expansion, of growth, of knowing what I was doing will have these circumstances. Now, he literally gets on his knees and he begs for his life because you're supposed to be upset that he put you in a danger. And some people may be upset, but me, I was like, whatever. You know, it's part of a job. I went to deliver a package and it wasn't something that turned out to be puppies and kittens and I killed people for it. Okay. No biggie. But this guy, who's supposed to be a up-and-coming territorial merchant of the underworld and legitimate, is now crying like a little bitch. And your choices that you have available are let him go or kill him because he betrayed you or because he put you in a situation that you were uncomfortable with. Well, why the fuck isn't there a way for me to side with him and then kill the entire other guild? Have like a little guild war of sorts and kill the entire guild. That's point one that is marked as retarded. So not only does this guy who sends you on a mission knowing damn well that if he's found out, he's going to get killed or attempted killed. So if you're going to make a play, you need to make a play as a character that severely is motivated to take over the enemy territory. And he doesn't. So let's continue with this and the fact that yes, I just killed now half of my enemy's guild. That guild that got in my way, I killed half of them. High important members, but that guild is important to the story later on. So if I go over to that guild later on in the story and I talk to them and I say, hey, I want to gain affection with you people so I can get into where I need to go with the story, even though you've killed their members, important ones at that, leaders, they say, sure, come on in, just do this task for us and we'll send you on your way. It's like, really? I just slaughtered half your guild and you're willing to look the other way. That is dumb. That is so stupid. And there's all these things that the game says, oh, your choices matter. Oh, the game has depth. No, it doesn't. It has a sub-level of gook, which says, look at us, look at all these options. What you have matters because if you have high intelligence, you can talk to somebody in a conversational log in a certain area and have a rebuttal that is intelligent. Versus if you're a warrior and you don't get that choice. Or if you have high resolve, you can stare somebody down or intimidate somebody. But these don't change the actual outcome of the game. They are just made to feel the individual player as a, oh wow, my mage is intelligent and I answered that great. Not a, wow, that changed the course of the game. Because even at the end, what you do does not matter. You might have some minor story bits of like, oh, well, this happened to this character, or this is what happened when I made this decision and I crossed this god. It's not a, if I win an argument, something will change. There's a point, let me make an example. There's a point where you have to talk to the Duke and win them over in an argument against other people upon what happens. I'm not going to spoil anything, but whether you're highly intelligent, have high resolve, absolutely retarded and can't click on any special questioning abilities, no matter what you do during that conversation, whether you actually succeed or fail based off of the conversation choices you have, the decision is irrelevant. the story progresses in a manner that your decision is irrelevant. So anything that you do to actually sway or talk is bullshit. Your choices don't matter. The story doesn't carry actual weight behind it. It has a main layer of fluff that says, look, somebody will react to you possibly different if you're either really vigilant and good or really evil. And outside of that, the rest just comes down to your attributes of your character, not something that actually matters or will change the course of the game or the story or anything of that regard. There is also a lot of situations where the writing in the game doesn't feel like it comes truly from the heart. I only found one character in the game, and the game does have some adult themes to it. Not anything serious like rape or child slaughter or anything like that. I mean, just a couple swear words here and there and arguments of passion more than anything else. It's definitely something that has an adult theme to it, but not an adult theme that makes adults uncomfortable, if that makes sense to you. There was only one character in the entire game which I was like, wow, this guy is pissed. This guy definitely believes in his convictions. Where there's other characters who are just completely bullshit. And they say, there are no gods, gods don't matter, there are 0 gods. But then they continue throughout the conversations later on, even though they made it clear that everything that they believe in life, everything they've strived for and sacrificed for was to tell everybody that the gods are fake. They continue to talk as if the gods are real. They continue to talk about the gods as gods instead of charlatans. If you believe that the gods are fake, and they may have a presence created by supernatural powers, but they weren't individually responsible for the creation of a world and the well-being of the people, then you would call them charlatans, phonies, imposters, liars, cheats, other words of degrading value to their characteristics and their status. You wouldn't continue to hold them in high esteem. So throughout the entire game, there's a continuational back and forth of just complete bullshit, which is filled with hypocrisy upon what the characters even say. They're like, well, it looks good on paper, but when it's actually in a character monologue, it's garbage. It lacks any of the actual passion or personality that character is supposed to have. There are a few situations and a few minor characters, such as companions, which have a very low role, which have a, oh, well, I see your one-side mind attitude, and that makes sense. But when you're going to have a character that holds multiple roles, multiple opinions, and an in-depth, intrinsic, highly valuable, characteristical position to the main story, you need to get your shit right. And this game has so much dialogue in it, but it's just a bunch of fluff. It's like reading a book, as I said, rather than actually enjoying an adventure. When you look at a game like Baldur's Gate 1, it had a lot of dialogue in that game, yes. But the dialogue was split up by the level design. We had freedom to go wherever you wanted. So if you came to somebody and you said, hey, I want to know what's going on. Wow, okay, I read a fair bit. Now I'm sort of bored. I'm going to go kill some stuff. And I'm going to go adventure in the world and kill stuff and then come back. Well, in this situation, it's, hi, what do I need to do? Okay, 12 pages of dialogue. Now I get to go find the 4 items they want me to find, bring them back, and have 12 more pages of dialogue, not to mention the extra dialogue that you acquire while looking for those items or completing those tasks. Thus why I say the game, story-wise, feels more like a detective game / tax IRS audit death by PowerPoint. It gets very old, and the game doesn't really connect itself well with the fluidity of the game. Which brings us into the combat aspect of the game. The combat doesn't feel like you're really progressing forward, and in part this does happen because of the story. Now later on in the story, there are some minor areas where you do get ambushed. I've got ambushed, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 times in a city by the enemy who wanted me dead. Oh, okay, I got ambushed by this group. That's nice. But outside of that, the story doesn't portray a sense with the combat. You complete a certain area and never feel like, oh wow, I completed this combat mission and I progressed forward in the story. I attained something. I really feel accomplished. Now why? Why does that feel that way? And it does come down to a couple key factors. But first, let's describe what the combat is. The combat is a very simplistic turn-based strategy moment. You have a choice to decide when your turns are. There is a time delay in between the different abilities that you have, but you can pause the game anytime you want to reassess the enemy, to reassess the position, and the overall being of the engagement. The combat progression is not free movement. The combat comes down to experience gained more by doing quests and completing quests rather than killing enemies. When you start out, you will gain some minor experience for killing enemies. As you can see though, in the bottom corner of the picture that I'm showing you, there are experience gained for killing enemies until you reach that cap. When your experience of a bestiary raises its max 100% and you know everything there is to know about that creature, you stop gaining experience from it. Now you can debate philosophically, well, maybe if you fight the opponent and you gain very little experience because you don't know what you're doing, and as you're fighting the opponent and you know more about the monster, you're gaining more experience. But then as you maximize your bestiary on your opponent, you never gain any more experience. Versus gaining experience for killing an opponent, and then as the opponent gets weaker and weaker because the more that you kill them, the less they have to teach you, which makes more sense. Having the cap go down from the max XP gained to 0 makes far more sense than having it go up and then stopping. Now when we jump into a bestiary, this is a prime example of what I'm talking about. You have these different creatures, and the bestiary is nice, it gives you a nice little information about the animal, but you can see all these stats, the defense and everything else. If your bestiary is 100%, you'll understand all of these creatures. As you can see, this one is not. So if I come across this creature and I kill him, I'll still gain some experience for killing that creature. But anything that I have fully engaged, then I will not gain any experience from killing them. So the problem arises in the fact that you will come across easily 10 to well over 20 creatures, such as crystal-eating spiders. I have killed 12 of these, and I have all of it. As you can see, Draga, I've defeated 62. So after about 10 now, I stop gaining any experience for them. This severely destroys the capability to feel a sense of progression while you're fighting through. The fact that you can only gain experience by the completion of quests is very annoying. This comes into the fact that the experience also scales based off of how many people in your party that you have. If you have 6 people, the cap for a certain creature will be higher to justify the distribution of the experience to the entire party. But if you're going single player, just one person, no party, your XP is going to be less. So there's not a question of, oh, if I play single, when I get to the end of the game, I'm going to be level 15, versus if I have 6 people, we're all going to be around level 10. There is not that case. So it does make the game harder in an aspect of progression if you're not going with an entire party, and makes the trade-off as like, well, what's the point? As well as the fact that when you do fight these enemies, you stop feeling like you're actually gaining anything. The loot in the game isn't anything that's all that amazing. It's tied together with the enchanting system that we talked about. So they throw this enchantment in, which makes it feel more like, oh, if I want to have a better gear, I need to craft or enchant some of my items to a higher status, rather than dungeon crawling and feeling like, oh, I found this epic legendary armor set or piece or bow of coolness. When you stop gaining experience for creatures, you have to ask yourself, well, there's really unlikely that I'm going to find any gear from killing this monster, and I gain no experience from doing it, so why am I going to waste my time killing these 5 ogres? I get no experience from them, they might not have any loot, and it's a waste of time. What is the point? Where's the satisfaction? And if you're saying the satisfaction alone is from the killing of the creatures, and that's it, then maybe you're playing the wrong game, and you need to be playing something more fast-paced like Diablo, or some such, where you just kill enemies by the droves, and even then, you get experience for doing it, and you have a loot chance drop, where this feels as if you put in the effort, but you gain no reward. This scales down to everything. If you have one player and you open a chest that's locked, or you disable a trap, or you complete a quest, the experience that you'll get will be diminished based off of the size of your party. The larger the party, the more experience points you get. This is really poorly designed. And it's poorly designed because if you want to distribute the experience gained throughout the entire party, then have the experience that is gained equally distributed to every person. So if you have 6 people in a party and you kill a monster and you get 30 experience, everybody in the party gets 30 experience for that monster. Because by saying that you're not going to get any more experience, but the experience you do get is going to be split up through every character. So you would start off, you kill this creature, you get 30 experience. Everybody is going to have to divide up 30 experience. So 6 divided by 30 is 5, so everybody gets 5 experience. And as the bestiary increases, the number of experience you'll get may increase until the bestiary reaches 100, upon which you'll get no more experience for that creature. Again, with the completion of quests. Congratulations, you have 6 people, you total gained 11,000 experience, which is split up among your 6 people, or you have 1 person, congratulations, you gained 2,000 experience. This idea is poorly designed because it doesn't actually make a sense of progression. It does the opposite. It limits my playstyle and my availability to choose upon where I want to go, because if I can only gain experience by completion of missions, then any side quest I do really isn't a question of, well, I know this castle is really strong to penetrate, but I may be able to slip in, take a few guys out here and there, loot some items, stable some traps, open some locks, and then slip out and come back later when I'm more prepared to really take them on seriously. And in doing that, I gain some experience from killing the opponents. Well, that's not the case here. If you kill an opponent, such as a human, you get 0 experience. So what happens later on in the game, about halfway through, anything you kill gains no experience. So not only do you gain next to no loot, but then you also gain next to no or no experience. Which begs the question of, well, why the hell am I doing this? Which ties in with story, which never has a sense of progression. You are not special in this game. You have a awakened soul, which isn't like, oh, you are special-blooded, or you are a masterful fighter. No, you're just an adventurer who ends up being put in a circumstance and you excel. Your awakened ability doesn't contribute to the combat, just the story. And yes, they might throw some abilities like, hey, you're awakened. So you have this one ability that will just say it does this and it's awakened because you're awakened. So it's like, yay, I'm got this one ability that I'm a little bit more special that other people don't have of the same class because of my story position. The game, though, is broken up very simply when you need to fight. You will need a tank. It is best to have a tank that is a character, a playable character, a fighter or a paladin that is a tank. Now, the thing that is very annoying about this is that it has 2 health bars. So if we look over on these characters, you'll see that have endurance and health. This is very stupidly put. They should have, if anything, put stamina or survivability instead of endurance, because endurance means survivability or health. That when you hear endurance, you think health. Well, as a fighter, you have a lot of gear. You have weapons that will allow you to regenerate your endurance. Not your health, your endurance. And you also have passive abilities which help, again, regenerate your endurance. So this status, this ability of the 2 separate mechanical-based health point system doesn't actually help the game and make it feel more difficult or progress. It actually hurts it, and here's why. The fact is, if I have a tank and my playable tank has 1,000 health, well, I only have 220 endurance. If my endurance hits 0 but I still have 800 health, my character is knocked out. So instead of the value points being readjusted and my health being 220 instead of the endurance, see where it's getting confusing, instead of it being revalued that way and all the spells to be focused on healing health, not endurance, it would have been more balanced. But what happens is this ability binds itself so closely to a fighting mechanic that you think because it's so close to a mechanic that it's useful, that it has some value that you're not seeing, or it has some intrinsic worth that makes it more complicated, when it doesn't. It's actually bullshit. And this is very easily seen by the 2 extreme measures. If you have really low endurance or you have a really high endurance, they're both measured. So let me explain this. As a tank, I have 1,000 health but 220 endurance. My endurance is regained by my armor, my passive abilities, and my racial abilities, things like that. Now, I'm a tank, so I have my armor reduction, my damage reduction, and everything else. So I take less damage to begin with, I'm very highly survivability, and my endurance easily regains. The only time this becomes an issue is when you fight a boss, or somebody who is much higher level than you and they hit you for really hard, harder than you were expecting. But that's what you have spells for. You don't necessarily need a priest unless you're playing on a harder setting, but you do have spells or abilities to help balance that out. But the fact is, the endurance does absolutely nothing for 90% of the fights, and for the other 10% of the fights, it doesn't actually make the game more interesting, it actually makes it more annoying. So if I'm fighting a boss and I get knocked out because he hit me continuously and I lost my 220 endurance, but I still have 800 health, I'm just there thinking, well, what the fuck's the point of having so much health? And that's when you need to use special hero abilities to absorb damage instead of him or regain his endurance. And as we look at the cleric, there are spells or abilities to druid and other classes which will regain your endurance. So even if I'm a tank and I'm taking next to no damage, I don't have to even worry about the majority of fights of my character even being knocked out because he's awesome sauce. The endurance of a high level is completely worthless and only comes to bite your ass against bosses. Now, how does it face when we talk about the lower level? And when we look at the other characters, we have a druid with 124 endurance but 500 health. We have a rogue with 132 and 568 health. A chanter with 140 but 600 health. Another chanter with 135 and 538 health. And a cipher with 104 and 413 health. So you can see the value of the endurance is low, as you saw in my tank, greatly in comparison to the health points. So if a tank who doesn't have a taunt, there is no hard taunt in the game. It's pretty much the tank goes in, he hopes to clean up and entice the enemy to hit him. But occasionally, a minion will get around the tank and go towards the party. This is why you need to use funneling tactics and keep people in tight quarters. That way, you're able to control the battle, not just so your character doesn't get overwhelmed, your tank, but also that they don't get by easily to everybody else. But in the case that AoE damage happens, or an ogre or a monster gets through and gets to one of your weaker support units, and they hit your weaker support unit, they will one-shot your unit. This is not a question of, oh, my character is, instead of 400 health, has 300 health, but no, now my character is knocked out. And it adds the question of, well, what the fuck? And this is perfectly represented in the ranger. When we look at the ranger, you have a pet. You have a capability to summon a pet. And the bear, which is supposed to be a highly defensive creature, high mitigation. Obviously, it's not going to be as much as a playable tank because you don't have armor, customization, and whatnot. But this character pet is good. It has about 300 to 400 health, but it only has 50 endurance. So the character isn't actually strong in the essence of 300 to 400 health. It actually has representation of 50 health. And the bear, when it gets knocked out and the battle is over, will get back right up. When you get knocked out, you're supposed to incur some penalty, depending on the level of difficulty you have it on, or get maimed, which is even a severe penalty, or your character will die if you get 0 health points. With the bear, the animal summon, it is not the case. Your bear gets knocked out, his endurance gets knocked out way before his health is even touched. His health may not even get touched, but his endurance will get knocked out. And then you have a bear sitting on the ground unconscious with 300 health, and you're like, what the fuck's the point of this? And it's the same regard across the board with all your characters. The endurance aspect is completely worthless. If they switched all of the healing spells to health and they took rid of endurance, that would help supplement it. But the question you have to ask is why? Why is it in there? Why is it in there? And that comes down to an even more complicated subject, which I'm going to explain. The fact is that your health regeneration happens very easily and very fast. As I progress through the game as a tank, I have say 1,000 health points, I can engage in 20 battles, and my endurance, which will get injured but replenish after battle, anybody whose endurance is hurt will automatically replenish. So you go into the next battle with 100 endurance. Your health is still injured, but your endurance gets back up to 100. The fact is, the game has a severe lack of depth in its combat mechanic when it comes to actually healing. There are no temples you can go to, such as in the older Neverwinter Nights, Baldur's Gate, Icewind Dale, those type of games, where you're like, wow, I am injured, I'm poisoned, I'm cursed, heal me priest, oh priest, and cleanse me of this ailment. There is none of that. So I can go through 20 battles, not have to worry about my tank dying, and he finally gets down to 200 health. I have some natural healing abilities as my characters level up. I gave them all field triage. I gave my tank a heal ability, so I can prolong a little bit more if I wish to fight some more enemies and get about 22, 23 encounters, say. So all that's done. My enemies have been defeated. I have, say, 100 out of 1,000 health left. My endurance is full. Well, now what do? Well, all I have to do is sleep. And if I have a camp gear kit, then I can sleep anywhere I want. Or I can just travel back to town and go to an inn and sleep. After 8 hours of sleep, your entire health bar will be replenished. This is why they did the endurance system. Because they said, oh, if we have the endurance system, then we can offer some sort of extra threat of death to the character instead of actually balancing out and having more depth in the health category. This is combined with the fact that you do not get ambushed. When you journey to a zone, there is a time limit. Say it will take you 8 hours to travel to the zone, and the world will update in its time as you can track how long it took you to get through the game. But you will not get ambushed through this game. You will not come across a party and say, oh no, I have been ambushed. You will not be in some dungeon and think to yourself, okay, we are out of spells. Nobody can heal. All our potions are gone. All our scrolls are gone. We need to get out of here. Well, what if we sleep? What if we take a rest in this dungeon and hope that we don't get ambushed in our sleep and have to fight off somebody while we're so injured? Well, that's not a concern either. So anytime you sleep in this game, you don't have to worry about being woken up for an engagement in a fight. You don't have to worry about being ambushed by bandits while traveling back to town. So there really is no reason to resupply outside of perhaps maybe getting more potions if you really want to, or more camp gear. Because I can easily just stop and sleep and then continue my journey forward. So the fact is, they give you such a large health pool instead of just balancing the damage taken versus the health you have and saying, okay, your health is low, here are some spells to replenish that. Those spells are on a rest cooldown, and if you have used them all up, you have to take the chance to travel back to town. You might get ambushed, or you have to take the chance of resting, which you might get ambushed, but there is none of that. So after you rest, you're fully healed up. So how do you counter the fact that you can continuationally push yourself through the game with fatigue being the biggest down draw to not sleeping, because your accuracy will go down the more tired people are? And it comes into the idea of let's make the endurance system. Instead of having actual tactical depth in the game where people have to have supplies, they need to be prepared to go into a dungeon. They need to actually think, okay, I need these supplies, I need these health potions, I need to use my money here and there to make sure that our choice to go into these areas is as secure and safe as possible. That's not the situation. You can get your face beaten in by an enemy, nearly die, but survive and win the battle, rest up and be good to go to fight the boss. There is no, let's storm the castle without the chance of retreat, and by the time we get to the end boss at the end of the castle, our supplies may be fatigued. And it would sure be nice if we can go to town to resupply more. We should have prepared better for this battle. No, just rest and then fight the boss. The game doesn't have the depth that people are saying or the game is saying. It severely lacks in that regard. Now when we talk about the actual spells in the game, all the spells are open to you outside of a mage. The mage learns spells not in a way of copying spells from scrolls. They learn mage by grabbing other people's grimoires, spell books, and then you have to spend money if you see a spell in that new book that you don't have. You have to spend money to learn that spell. Then you can apply that spell to your own book. And you take the 4 or 5 slots of these spells, and then when you go to the bar, you have these all available to use. Now they will say on the number here, I have 4 spells I can cast number 1, 4 of number 2, 4 of number 3. But I have all the spells available that I want to cast. So it sort of does it like a sorcerer would in Baldur's Gate 2, where it said you have all the spells, you learn the spells naturally, and you choose which spells you want to go. Well, this says you learn all the spells, and then you decide which spells you want to use, but you can only use 4 per rest. The mage focuses more on a few damaging spells, but more control and manipulation and AoE damage. where the druid is very strong in its single target and debuffing of the enemy, and they have some really beneficial spells for a tank to give them that little extra boost of protection. In between a priest or a druid, when it comes to protecting a tank, I would take a druid. A priest is really good for protecting the entire party, but if you can keep the entire party safe due to your tank and location of fighting, then the druid will be more beneficial for the tank specifically. Same thing with the Cypher. The Cypher is a very mentally focused character who focuses his power to either benefit somebody or to confuse or control the enemy. The thing is, the spells all kind of fall into the same different category of a circle. Yes, the mage's spells have more control and damage in the AoE. The druid has single target damage, heavy, and debuffs, and a few positive buffs. The chanters have the summons, which don't stand alone by themselves, and you have to already engage in combat for a while to actually be able to summon in the first place, and they are pretty weak the later on you go in. They'll easily be wiped out due to any AoE. And lastly, the Cypher, which is good for a tank as well, to help support them, because your tank can take on so much damage. And the only downside is the fact that if you take a lot of spike damage against a boss, you don't need to worry about your health falling, because we already talked about the endurance. You have to worry just about surviving the endurance hits, because your endurance takes so much damage, but there are abilities which can prevent you from taking damage. If you focus your tank with more resistance against stun and knockdown, it won't be an issue. Don't worry about paralyzation, because paralyzation, anything that can paralyze you, isn't going to be doing that much damage to you to begin with, because they're more magically based. So they're not going to be hitting you every time for insane amount of damage with you unable to react to it. And this comes down to the lack of tactical capability in the game, especially when it comes down to traps. I was very disappointed in traps. You're able to gather up traps by either buying them in a merchant later on, or collecting the traps you dismantled that you've come across. Hey, I see a trap on the floor, I'm going to disable it, and then I can use it later. But you're only able to put down one trap at a time. If you try to put down a secondary trap when the first one's down, you will lose that first one. And the thing why this is annoying is because if you're using a trap that is effective against an opponent, then that opponent did not even need to have a trap placed down for him to begin with. Because if you use a trap on a higher, stronger based character, it will do next to no damage. It is very weak. Your mechanic skill is supposed to improve the damage output of the trap, but even still, it's one trap against a boss, and it's not that useful. If traps cost 20 times what they do in the game, but they allowed you to create more, and they allowed you to place more one down, then it could have been balanced, and it would have allowed sort of a money dump in the game. But the way the combat is, the game is very simplistic, but there's a severe lack of actual accomplishment in the game. As we talked about the experience being split up and given and stopped being given after a certain amount of enemies destroyed, your progressions seem less important. The side quests are not as important to continue. The main storyline of the game isn't something that is so imposing or powerful that you're like, oh, I really should do some of these side quests to beef myself up some to be able to handle the end boss. The end boss, when I fought him, did take me back for a moment because I wasn't expecting as much damage output that he would do right off the bat, and the position of awkwardness they would put you in to really give the boss a bonus. Throughout the entire game, the hardest fight is the end boss. He's about 50 times stronger than anybody you'll face anywhere else in the game in his damage output. Now, if you use spells and everything else to really try to control the situation, the area of damage given may be lessened, but how much damage they base do does not degrade that point. So the combat becomes less about, oh, I hope my tank survives, or I hope my combat is good, or I hope my DPS really hits home. And it comes more into, this is repetitive and unrewarding. I gain nothing from killing my enemies, and the side quests give me very little for the amount of effort and work I put into them. The amount of perhaps reading you have to do, or locational finding, or treasure hunting, or weighing through enemies that give you no experience to get to a chest that gives you an upgrade but not even an upgrade, because gear is focused by the enchanting system more than dungeon finding. I was severely disappointed in the combat aspect of the game because how they limited me in my availability to actually feel like the choices of where I went mattered. When I decide I want to go into a field and start slaughtering a bunch of little monsters to gain experience, or I want to go on a killing rampage in town for some experience, or I want to siege a human castle but I don't gain experience because they're humans, whatever the case is, the fact that I can't gain experience unless I specifically do a quest after the few creatures I have killed stop giving me experience, it limits my ability to even want to fight. I go from saying, well, why should I fight these people? Because the chance of them having a gear item that I need is next to none. I gain no experience from doing it, and I risk the threat of dying. It's not worth it. There is no satisfaction, there is no reward. So at the end of the day, can I recommend this game? Performance-wise, right now, it has a lot wrong with it. Plenty of bugs, which you may or may not experience, so that's always a toss of a coin. You may find out that, hey, no issues. Or it may be like, wow, these are really annoying. So if you're worried about performance, then give it a month or two, maybe more. Character creation, I absolutely love it. The bountiful degree of the character creation, as well as the background and the customization, that really allows you to make the character feel more like an expression of yourself or the expression of the fantasy character that you want, really hits home. They did an excellent job in the character creation, and I applaud them for that. Again, with the interface, they had a few slight issues when it comes to the interface in the different areas, but overall it was sleek, plenty of options to justify how your interface looks, and I didn't have an overall issue in that regard. It was very clean, very sleek, and I enjoyed it. The level design I was very disappointed in. Graphically beautiful, artistic, the vision, the idea, and the world was done great. But the open or lack of open world was really a deterrent which spilled into the story and the combat, making things even worse. The story didn't help the level design at all based on the fact that you think areas would be important and they turn out not to be. And the long list of reading rather than actually getting to the point made it feel more like I was reading a book. Not to mention the fact that you'll have a continuational sense that you don't have all the answers, as you are a watcher which is split of his soul from past lives. So they have this belief that you will need to know so much more knowledge, and you'll need to actually go to a wiki page to read more about the world to even understand exactly what's going on, because as you progress through the world, you don't really understand too well until it's nearly over. I was really disappointed in the story, and instead of the story being something that really drew the character in, made the character feel like they were a prominent figure of power, made them feel like they were something that was just epic or everything scaled together. I sieged this castle and my decision matters. The occupants of the castle did not agree with that more than just attacking me, but in dialogue as well and the atmosphere, and that was never the case. I never felt that the choices I made affected the story in any impactful fashion. All of it was just surface. Which also comes into the combat, which is very poorly done due to the fact that the spell choice and decisions that you have are lacking immensely. The customization between the different characteristics are nice, but they are not far enough. The cleric and the druid, the chanter, the cipher, and the mage may all be casting spells and may do it in different fashions, but their spells and what they do really don't play such an impactfully different role from each other that you can't get by without having one of those characters or a certain spell that gives you an advantage over having the other. They try to make them so mundanely balanced, I feel, instead of being more situational availability. Hey, we're going to wade through this nest of undead. We have our clerics, so we'll be good. Or, hey, we're going to fight this dragon. We have our mages, so we're good. Whatever the case may be, it doesn't feel like that. It feels as if the characters are so watered down and balanced out to be equal with each other, rather than to have a bonus against certain situations where others will be at a disadvantage. Combined with the fact that you have a double endurance system. You have endurance, which should be stamina or survivability, and your health points. And it's very easy for a character to get knocked out if their endurance gets down to 0. This degrades the value, as I talked in great lengths about in the combat section, along with the fact that going through these fights that you have to fight and survive will eventually stop giving you experience, makes your progression feel more tedious to wade through all these long laundry lists of reading to not even really feel like you have all the facts, to gain experience only from a quest and not any of the killings, combined with all the loot that really doesn't feel all that amazing. They tried to scope themselves out too far without having much depth, and they sacrificed a lot of areas. In the end, is the game enjoyable? And a lot of people out there say, yes, this game is amazing, but is it really? The fact is, this game is accepted with open arms and beloved because there is nothing really like it. The fact is that the only other game that is somewhat similar to a renaissance that we once loved and knew was Divinity Original Sin. And while I would recommend this game over Divinity Original Sin, I am not impressed with this game whatsoever. I have put over 40 hours into this game. I have made sure I have understand what I'm talking about. And while I may be missing a few key facts, I may have overlooked something here and there, or I forgot to talk about one thing or another, I am not hating on this game. I am simply saying it as it is. The game has faults, and the only reason why it's being proclaimed as such a high-raised, amazing title is because there is nothing else on the market that resembles the quality, nostalgic feel of Baldur's Gate that we loved. The game's play was slow, tedious, and boring. The writing was very poorly done, had a lot of holes into it, in between the character personality holes of them not really feeling like they are owning their character, as they are filled with hypocrisy upon the things they say. Tied into the fact that it doesn't give you all the information because it wants you to feel like you're making choices based off of having answers or experiences that you don't have. There's a point in the story later on where it asks you why you betrayed somebody in a past life. You did not play during this betrayal. You did not experience this betrayal. You did not go over this betrayal in a vision or a cinematic or a storyboard. It has happened, and it is told to you that it has happened, and they want to say, how does that make you feel? They want to judge you based off of a characteristic and give you a choice to reply to that scenario based off a situation which you did not impart on. There's a lot of wanting answers from your character and from you when you don't have those answers because you did not experience those events. The complete lack of reward when it comes to dungeon diving and combat made me feel like I never progressed. Made me feel as if my progression was very slow to a point of molasses. Does the game have some replayability value? And as we talked in character creation, that is something that you have to decide. But in between the lack of growth, the fact that you can be a character whatever you want, anytime you want, to add new character, and the transparency that's very easily seen and the lack of tactics truly needed to beat the game, it's not all that difficult. If you know what you're doing, of course. You do have to read. I'm not going to stand here and say I'm better than you. But if you understand how you read the abilities, understand that different members of your party work well in different fashions, and you utilize everybody's strength and you're careful about every engagement, it's not going to be difficult because the enemy severely lacks any true tactical creativity or uniqueness. Yes, there are occasionally the hard fights, the fights that make you have to reload up. But these aren't because the damage was beyond what your character could handle. It was because of a double health system which we talked about. The times which I have died were more due to bullshit rather than actual outwitting by my opponent, or outstrengthed by my opponent. I see no point in replaying this game due to the fact of how the character progression happens, and I did not enjoy my time in it. In the beginning of the game, it was enjoyable. The more I learned about the game, the more I understood it, the more I looked into it, the more I looked behind the scenes at the mechanics and understand why. And I asked the question, why do these work? What makes these work? It does not fit well enough for me to actually justifiably enjoy. If you are nostalgic filled and you don't care about the why, then yes, maybe you'll enjoy it. If you're very easygoing and you don't mind not gaining experience for killing creatures over time, and you're the type of person who, when you see this game, says, wow, I would most likely play that on easy or normal, then this may be challenging still for you, and it may be an experience worth having. If you're hardcore for the style of game, nostalgia purposes may entice you to get this game, and I don't hold against you. If you buy this game because it looks familiar to things of the past, that's why I did it, that's why I'm doing this review. The game reached out to hit a climax of height of glory which other games have reached in its past, but it has not reached that. The only reason it has gotten as high a praise as it has is because it does not have competition in the market. This genre is not saturated with these types of games, and so people are willing to easily accept and overlook anything this game has a fault with or an issue, and say good enough, but not here at Mob Reviews. The game is not good enough because we look at everything, not just one thing. And so at the end of the day, the game did not respect my time. I never felt like I progressed, and I never felt like I was actually moving forward. The game felt like a giant waste of time, a chore. Something that I couldn't really enjoy because it was too hard to understand fully story-wise in the beginning of what was going on. Too much for too little. A lot of the sequences, the fights, the environment, the reading, it all feels as if it's drawn out as much as possible to extend your gameplay time in the game as much as possible so they can say our game has 40 hours of content instead of 10 or 20. The base story itself, if you do just the base story, you're looking at about 5 to 10 hours. Now, maybe 10 to 20 if you're brand new and you need to find out how the game works. But I'm talking about not doing any side quests, just base story. The base story is very quick and very easy to get through. On top of that, the bugs that I've faced and everything else, if you want this game and you are looking at it with adoring eyes, I would recommend getting it when it's on sale, if nothing else. I do not do this review out of spite for the game. I do not do this review to piss off some fanboys. I do this to inform people. And if you want the game still after everything I said, that's perfectly fine. But if you're worried that you might have the same experience or issues or feel gypped, then get it on sale. Because at the current price point that they are asking, I feel it's a giant waste. Me personally, I cannot recommend it. I did not enjoy it. I did not see the appeal that everybody else saw, because I remember and I understand how things work. I am more disappointed in the game rather than frustrated or angry at it, because of what it could have been rather than what it is. But at the end of the day, it's up to you to make your own decision as you are your own person. So ladies and gentlemen, I have been SocioPsycho and this has been Mob Reviews, and I hope this has been of help to you, and I'll see you next time.